that can get difficult, saying goodbye to your family. I'm fortunate in that I've got a pretty understanding wife, and as she said, she knew what she was getting into when we got married, so she supports me 100%. Sons, my two sons and daughters are a little bit different. Got two children from previous marriage, and yeah, they find it a little bit difficult. My younger son in particular, he found it a bit hard. I think he struggled with it the most. First impressions in Afghanistan, yeah, the place is visually stunning. It really hits the senses. You don't know what you're facing. First time I got there was coming into their winter, and yeah, that was a shock to the senses. First winter Afghanistan, where was I? Baluchi Valley at Patrol Base Marshall, and we got out there. The winter hadn't fully set in just yet. I got in there, it was late November, and yeah, it was sort of like going into a nice cold winter here in Australia, but then the snow starts to kick in, low cloud kicks into play. You wake up in the morning, our shelters effectively were just swags rigged up on top of stretchers or whatever we could get our hands on underneath tarps, jammed in between the back wall of the base and a little retaining wall in front of that. And yeah, it was certainly a shock to the system. Putting your clothes on in the morning, getting ready, you had to be super cautious to make sure you didn't hit the ices or the icicles off the inside of the tarp, because it just went straight down the back of your shirt, and yeah, it didn't tickle, that's for sure. Patrolling for an old bloke like me, yeah, trying for a near 50-year-old trying to keep up with 18, 20-year-old fit blokes was yeah, an exercise in pain. Plus being Air Force, we don't have a lot in the way of the real green role out in patrolling, so your patrol fitness is just non-existent. And if you're lucky, you've got a good group of guys who will acknowledge that and sort of support and carry you to an extent. But within about the first 3 weeks, patrol fitness was coming on board, but yeah, it was a very, very painful and exhausting 3 weeks. First tour over there, my job was actually an EOD technician on ground, so I was a part of a Explosive Ordnance Disposal team. I was one of the two techs within a 3-man team. I suppose it's a mixture of fear, excitement, especially for us, it's the sort of thing you work all your life towards doing in the military. You could say it's just the sheer insidiousness of it. It's the way of modern warfare, really. Gone are conventional days where you can sit there and shoot at a good person, you lob an artillery shell at them. IEDs extremely efficient for a terrorist group. So it's that fear of the unknown, what you're dealing with, and the devastating effect that it can have. You rock up on job and the engineers have already found it. To all intents and purposes, those are the guys that had the most important job in country as far as I was concerned from our side of the house. And you'd rock up on site, EOD would be called forward, not a problem. You step straight in, get your hand over briefing, and you swing into play. And the guys hold back. They know you're there to do a job. They know that, you know, you're the crazy brave, as we got termed. You're the guys that are going down to play with something that's going to turn you into pink mist if you stuff up. So, but you don't really think about it. It becomes a challenge. All your training kicks into play. You're concentrating on doing things right. You switch on. It's pure job. You don't have time to think about anything else. All you're concerned about is getting the job done safely, efficiently, and looking after your team and looking after the rest of the guys in the squad. If you've got the ability to gather intel or biometrics from that evidence or from that item to try and subsequently bring the bomb makers to task, then if you can do it, you do it. The big thing that's going to kill you is the main charge. That's your number one priority. If you can neutralise a circuit and do it safely, efficiently, without any significant risk, you do it. You don't really think about the end result or anything bad going wrong. You just think about, okay, what do I need to do to make this thing safe? And once you've got, you know, what we call the golden eggs out of it, you've got, you know, the biometrics from it, then as far as the main charge is concerned, well, hey, that goes to the AD gods. So she's safe from there. It's certainly difficult with a cavalry element that just wants to get out and go, infantry that just want to take the fight to the enemy, whereas the engineers and EOD, you are ultra cautious. You know that everything's a risk. Every vulnerable point's a risk. You get the spider senses tingling, that sick feeling in your gut. There's something coming up that, you know, this just doesn't look right. And you try and convey that through to the commanders. And what we found initially is a lot of them don't want to listen. It's almost like it's a black magic. They don't trust you. But once you start turning up on site, you start uncovering devices, you start rendering safe devices, and they see the size of some of the stuff and the potential for damage it can have to the vehicles and also to the guys. That respect grows rather rapidly, and thankfully, if you've got a halfway switched on patrol commander, he takes that on board and he acts on it. But if you don't, then it's a bit of a problem. First rotation contact back home, I found outside wasn't too frequent, especially up in the valleys. You only had the satellite phone, and we did have internet connections ad hoc depending on weather conditions. What I found usually was you had satellite phone twice a week, and for about 10 minutes. And whenever mine come up at the time of day when it would be midnight, 1 o'clock back home, I didn't bother because I know my wife was working, so I just didn't want to disturb her. And she knew, so long as she heard it from me in some way, shape or form, once a week, once a fortnight, be it by email, just a quick heads up to say, yeah, I'm all fine, everything's okay, it was all right. So I'm a bit of a lone wolf too, so I don't need to have constant contact back home, whereas some guys do. You put humans into a confined space and it brings out the best and the worst in everybody. You'll find some people look for that constant interaction with others on base, others isolate themselves and just lock themselves up in their rooms and play games on their laptops or watch movies. Some get involved in the social aspects that occur. Others, like the WIT team, well, we didn't really have much time for it because for us it was work pretty well. So WIT, in a nutshell, basically you're there as a forensics, biometrics exploitation capability. We do post-blast, prosecution of evidence, fingerprinting, biometrics, etc., all the way through, looking to put the pieces of the jigsaw puzzle together, with the end result being that a bomb cell is shut down or an IED maker is located and captured. The biometrics enrolment for us is looking for fingerprints, DNA, so hair samples, bits of skin sample, blood, anything like that. So everybody has a telltale fingerprint. Any crime leaves evidence. So for us, we look at the biometric side of the house in its purest form being fingerprints off a device, right through to biometric enrolment, where you're going to be looking at taking facial photographs, iris scans, buccal swabs buccal swabs. Dave will have a crack at me for saying it wrong. Buccal swabs of persons of interest, and that goes into a database. So if at any stage down the track a piece of evidence comes to light with fingerprints that are matched to those individuals, you now have the evidence necessary to be put through to a court of law for suicide bombers. Rocking up a site for those is sheer bedlam and devastation. It's probably the most appropriate way to put it. Depending on how quickly we get on scene, we can arrive and the casualties are still there. Evidence of the bomber, or what remains of the bomber, will still be there. And you've then got to try and prosecute that site as quickly as possible. And unlike forensic officers back here in Australia with the police force who may have days and weeks to prosecute a site, we try and work on 15, 20, 25 minutes max, because the longer you're there, the bigger the target you become. So you try and, it can be rather daunting. You need to switch back into the training and isolate your sites, and your EAD technician and your SOCO, your scenes of crime officer, they're the primary element that'll turn up to one of those jobs. So you're the primary deployable team, two-man team. So you need to sort of split it up. So one can concentrate on the IED, the glass seat and the evidence pertaining to it. The other can concentrate on scene photography, overview shots, looking for firing points, all these sort of things that help build up that bigger picture. So you can get swamped with the devastating side of the house, but what we found, I had a good team. I had an excellent SOCO, guy I owe my life to for watching me back more often than not, because would get engrossed on site. But yeah, you switch into a mode and you just roll with it. And what you may think seems like hours on site can get prosecuted in 20, 25 minutes. You don't really have time to feel drained about it, because once you're finished on site, it's then you've got to get back into the lab, and your job doesn't finish. The prosecution of the site is only the tip of the iceberg, really. All the work that's really involved with that particular incident. So 20, 25 minutes on site leads to potentially 16, 20 plus hours of work afterwards. So you don't really have time to sort of ramp down after it. You're more or less ramping up even more. I suppose everybody always questions the value of why we're there, because we get bombarded with it from back home, from political aspects, those that hate war. We're always getting bombarded with it. Everything back here in Australia just goes on life as per normal. On operations, that just doesn't exist. It is a world unto itself. And for people that don't understand it or haven't experienced it, it's difficult to explain. They need to stop and think. Is that people are away from their loved ones. They can't just stop what they're doing. They can't just suddenly make themselves safe. You're in a theatre of war. There is no such thing as safe. You know, everything from being shot at, being shelled, rocketed, not knowing if the people that you're working with, if there's an insider threat and you're suddenly going to have somebody turn around, supposedly a comrade at arms, turn around and start shooting at you. You've got that constant threat. You're constantly living in fear over there. For me personally, I don't know if we have any success or if we have had any worth there, because stuff that you see that guys build gets destroyed. We try and strengthen places, open up roads, improve the quality of life. It only gets destroyed. But for me personally, the thing I found with it was the kids. Little things on life, even if it's some minor change or minor improvement in quality of life for the kids, that to me is an improvement, and that makes it worth being there.